Risk of disaster has far-reaching developmental effects. Disasters happen on a regular basis, damaging economies, capability, and viability. The notion of hazardous occurrences and disasters as a result of always present risk circumstances is reflected in disaster risk. And this was actually seen to a large extent during the last 2 years as well. Different sources estimated that more than $15 billion worth of loss of assets was incurred due to floods and cyclones. If loss of earthquake and fire are counted, the loss would increase significantly. Now, different possible loss from disaster risk may be difficult to measure. So obviously, all of it cannot be counted. Respected guests, in order to build some risk financing plan in terms of coping with major and complicated catastrophes, Dhaka Chamber has taken an initiative as part of its commitment to sustainable industrial and economic growth to analyze current laws and policy instruments on disaster risk management and risk financing. As we know, private sector is a major source of employment, a provider of goods and services, and one of society's greatest investors. However, as seen by recent significant catastrophes, the private sector is increasingly bearing the brunt of disaster consequences in terms of destructions and losses. While many disaster victims believe that the government bears primary responsibility for their safety and security, the private sector, particularly large corporations, has long been a vital contributor to humanitarian action, providing critical expertise, skills, and resources, particularly in the area of disaster recovery and response. Distinguished guests, reflecting a broader paradigm shift in disaster management from a relief-centric approach to proactive approach in disaster financing, disaster mitigation, and preparedness, there have been efforts to more clearly define the role and responsibility of private sector in disaster management alongside the government, development partners, and NGOs. Disaster risks, more specifically potential loss of life, injury, or loss of damaged assets over a certain period of time may be quantified, at least in information of the current hazards and patterns of population and socioeconomic growth. Since private sector industries are often exposed to colossal damages, especially in major manufacturing and industrial sectors, causing from fire and chemical and earthquake-related disasters, the initiative of Dhaka Chamber in Private Sector Emergency Response Team and Private Sector Emergency Center, or PEOC, can avoid massive loss and damage as a timely one engaging all stakeholders and make a good precedent in disaster management move in Bangladesh. We would urge all relevant government agencies like the Ministry of Disaster Management and Environment Ministry to connect to the PEOC to ensure wider focus and benefit of it. We also seek government and development agencies to enhance the capacity building training for all stakeholders from PERT to keep significantly lower all disaster-related industrial hazards and ease sustainable economic growth in the years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, I will not extend my speech further. We will hear the valued discussions of our panelists about the role of the private sector working group and private sector emergency response team. I'm thanking you all again for attending this crucial and timely event. Thank you very much, and Allah Hafiz. I would at this point request our keynote presenter, Mr. Qazi Shahidur Rahman, Humanitarian Affairs Specialist, UN Resident Coordinator's Office, to present your paper on the role of private sector working group and private sector emergency response team. Moreover, I would like to request you to talk about how the emergency response team can be functional. Sir, if you would kindly.
Good afternoon, distinguished panelists and the guest. Thank you for giving me the opportunities to explain a little bit on the vision we have seen through this project and try to connect the private sector with the humanitarian landscape in Bangladesh. So in my okay. So if you look at that picture, that is the European Union draw that flower basically. They said that each of the element, whether the preparedness or disaster risk reduction or anticipatory action is connected to each other. Basically like a flower, so that you cannot distinguish from humanitarian to the whole landscape of the development. So that is the main message to giving to that the private sector is connected to the whole of the society basically, from the disaster risk reduction to the humanitarian action and the recovery of the whole of country we experience on the COVID. And if you look at the Bangladesh disaster management structure, and you will see the law, policy, and procedure is very interconnected each other, and always give the opportunities to the private sector to have basically a space on that and contribute to there. And if you look at the global discussion on the 2016 on the World Humanitarian Summit, they are also have been launching a global network, this called as Connecting Business Initiative, to connect the all over the world in the same accountability system. So within that landscape, that the UN and government try to help to the humanitarian community give a better access, and they are basically try to develop the separate plan to support the government-led effort. So in the climate-related disaster, UN and government, basically other stakeholders, and propose a nexus strategy for next 5 years in line with the National Disaster Management Plan. And that National Disaster Management Plan for climate-related disaster, they are also planning something on the earthquake for next 5 years. So these strategy also basically tells us how we connect to the private sector in the whole landscape of the disaster management if we want to have a efficient disaster response. And if you look at the actor, disaster management actor, they are saying something very interestingly, that if you look at the private sector, they are both at the national level and that they are both at the international level, they are both connected. So if you look at the SDG financing and also have the discussion on that, how private sector can contribute to the whole of financing to the whole of society. So UN is basically supporting to the government in line with their mandate. So UN Bangladesh also supporting to the government, hand in hand to the government, to try to develop the capacity and try to develop some of the technical knowledge from the global level. But one thing is very important for humanitarian work, that is basically the humanitarian principle. That could be very interesting point to the business sector also. If they understand well of the 4 humanitarian principles, that could be a guide as the ethical business practice. And that could be valued for their branding, their status and their sustainability. And if you look at the UN accountability structure at the global level, General Assembly to the IAC, Interagency Standing Committee, that has been the well organized, well coordinated at the global level, and that has been endorsed with the member state. And that Interagency Standing Committee have a mechanism to guide any of the humanitarian work if needed, and government welcomed or government requested. And in line with that, in Bangladesh, in 2012, there is a humanitarian coordination task team, try to have coordinate with the government and better way have a national cluster system in the SOD 2019. So that is the big change in the whole disaster management system in Bangladesh. And if you look at that 11 cluster in Bangladesh, and if you look at the working group, one working group endorsed as a private sector engagement working group. So humanitarian is now thinking that the private sector is basically as a hand-in-hand partner. Though their mandate a little bit different, but they could be more value added to the whole landscape. That is the discussion with that project, that how private sector will organize in a network so that the private sector could better understand how they protect their business as well as how they contribute to the society. They are already contributing, but a little bit silos that need to be a little bit better coordinated and better reporting. That could be guide of the SDG reporting. If we can guide a little bit on the private sector loss and private sector investment on the resilience, that could be very interesting, and that could be recognized at the global level, and that could be part of the Sendai framework. So with that discussion, if you look at that, the private sector, they are one of the recognized entity in middle of the government and the UN, and there is a IFRC, NGOs, and they are the private sector. So the private sector, not only the humanitarian organization asking to invest money for the humanitarian, no. They ask the expertise, use the logistic capacity, use the supply chain. That could be a very interesting way to. Top of that, there is the expectation to the humanitarian community that our volunteerism at the rural level based on the community base. But if you look at the urban, and there is a less community here, rather there is a more business here. You need food, you order to Food Panda. But if you look at that, every guard from each of the building, there could be a potential volunteer. So this project basically try to engage all the security forces or all the private sector that could be develop a force of search and rescue. If something happened, an earthquake, or something happened at big scale, if you look at the COVID pandemic and how much they have contributed. But one thing problem here, the reporting. Who is reporting on that? How much they contributed, who will say to the whole of the society? They are not doing business. They are doing the responsibilities of the society, and they are doing that. So that is a win-win solution to the business sector and the humanitarian community sector. If we can connect to them, we can earn their expertise, and also they have the resources. They could invest a little bit from their own money to invest to the society. They are who are the left behind all those things, then hand in hand with the government. So in Bangladesh, we try to develop something at the new model that could connect all the DRR, preparedness, and other things. And that has been recognized as a best practice from the Bangladesh. And we talk about couple of elements in there, and the 4 elements, we call it a speed approach. Speed approach, we are trying to promote a speed approach in Bangladesh so that the connecting to the not only humanitarian, but also little bit DRR, we call it new term as a nexus. So nexus is a big issue. Nexus is nothing new, but they said that whenever you are the funding or stakeholder or your mandate, but you will do a collective outcome that has been set by the National Disaster Management Plan. If you can set that target and helping government hand in hand, that could be improve much more on the efficiency of disaster management. Like as media, they are contributing to the information management. So, but if you look at the other private sector, they are investing lots of money. They have a pre-launch. So that everything needs to be a little bit on the win-win. Everyone doing for their own purpose, mandate, and other things. That's not a big problem. But the problem is how to improve a little bit accountability and other things. But if you look at that in Bangladesh, what we did with the Ministry of Disaster Management, we try to have a big humanitarian stakeholder in Bangladesh, 3,000 NGO. There is a 24 UN agency. There is a large number of international agency, Red Cross. So how we work together basically in the support to the government effort. That's why we develop a 5-year nexus strategy to support to the government on one front. Earthquake, we have the separate plan. But these basically the strategy basically tells you what you needed for Bangladesh. Not for each of the stakeholder, but in Bangladesh we see something 4 things needed. One is needed information management. Risk information need to be more visible. Private sector need that. How do their work in the risk context? Because of if you look at the risk, Bangladesh is one of the risk-prone country. In the Inform Index, they are the 27th rank. But due to resilience, they're a little bit behind. So but resilience capacity is much more high. But if you look at the small scale disaster have loss, enormous economic loss. In the last in the last 7 years, we see something 1,000 million USD have been impacted in the small scale disaster. If something have bigger, is it a more conservative way we can calculate? So private sector need to be understand their risk also. They can analyze their risk. Also, there is a need for preparedness. So how do they do their preparedness on the normal time preparedness as well as preparedness as the immediately readiness? So then also we talk about a little bit on the capacity, how we will work on the capacity development. There is a SOD implementation there. We supported the SOD implementation. Not only training could develop the capacity, but also a systematic thinking to area-based approach of DMC could be improved. And also there is a response, there is a needed money when the disaster happened, complement to the government-led effort. Government have enormous capacity in Bangladesh, but there is a huge population. Last disaster flood, 5.4 million people have been impacted in flood. 50% need assistance. So that the government system, they could provide 35% people. But there is something needed to complement. The quality and volume need to be improved on the response. So that with that notions, basically, there is a couple of things need to be key takeaway, all the discussion on the humanitarian coordination architecture or the government-led system. So we need something, the private sector effective engagement on that. So if we can have a private sector engagement, that could be very efficiently if they understand well the landscape. How government is operating, how international community is supporting. So they could better position. Another also thing, if they understand the humanitarian principle, that could be very ethical principle could be improved from the business if they understand well on the humanitarian principle. And also the coordination, so that there is a big opportunities here to have a private sector engagement with the whole landscape of the disaster risk management. Also the private sector engagement could be a win-win solution. They could come up with a new technology. They could come up with a very interesting solution, market-based solution. No need to invest under with the government money or public money to that investment. That could private sector could be innovate that. If you have lots of example there. Also, there will be a private sector connected initiative needed. There is a network of private sector, not on the individual agencies, but also the private sector network could be improved something on their understanding of each other. Have a coordinated accountability mechanism among themselves. At the global level, there is a connecting business initiative have been launched at the World Humanitarian Summit. Also, there is a private sector engagement framework needed here. How the private sector engage with the whole disaster management. How we see as a responder, not always as a responder, but also how they protect the business gain. If they protect the business gain, that could be continue the supply chain at the community, and you will get the product immediately. So that is the also. Also, there is a very interesting national risk financing strategy. So business will contribute. So we have the responsibilities to how the whole the government sector is financing to the private sector, insurance and other thing need to be very clear. Because of that, when they will lose, something market-based mechanism needed to compensate their loss. Also, there is a market-driven technology. That is basically they are doing lots of research and study that could be very contribute to that. So we need to have a reporting system improving. Where is doing what among how, that we call 4W metrics in the humanitarian system. So private sector need to have a network. That network could be contribute to the whole of discussion of how we can support the MODMR and DDM led disaster management process in Bangladesh. Thank you.
Do we have a microphone for this for the next panel discussion? Can I get microphone? থাকবে কি? Okay, right. Okay, fine. সামনে দিয়ে যাবেন?
First of all, let me just thank you, sir. I thought your presentation was wonderful. And in fact, it was quite eye-opening in many ways that And I think a lot of us often forget that every single private institution is already investing in this infrastructure. Every company, every even private residences have their own security forces that are standing guard. They have their camera systems built in and other risk mitigating solutions that they're using on an individual basis. However, this sort of framework, which connects all these private institutions under one sort of framework and joint collaborated effort, I think that is the best way to move forward in mitigating risks in a disaster-prone country like Bangladesh, and certainly Dhaka, where we have one of the highest densities in terms of population in the capital. Having said that, I think we are at a stage where we can start the panel discussions. I would like to ask Mr. Abdul Latif Hilali, Project Director, Urban Resilience Project, Rajuk PERT. As we know, Rajuk is responsible for the preparation of strategic and master plans for the city and ensure planned development of the city. Now, I would like to ask you about how Rajuk is planning in building codes for preparing and mitigating the disaster risk and any other mechanisms. Would you like to use the dais?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum. বাংলা ইংলিশ মিলিয়ে হবে ফরেনারদের তো দেখতেছি না আর কি আছে ফরেনার ওকে First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I am Abdul Latif Hilali, Chief Engineer Rajuk, and Project Director, Urban Resilience Project. Resilience, already we know resilience. First of all, before 10 years, 15 years ago, I don't understand what is resilience. Then resilience, this is like elasticity. And resilience like comeback. And finally, we understand resilience to enhance the capacity of a nation, of a country. This is actually resilience. And my project name is Urban Earthquake Resilience Project. And in 2011, in December, Government of Bangladesh through ERD requested World Bank for exploring vulnerability assessment, and accordingly World Bank engaged international consulting firm EMI, Earthquake and Megacity Initiatives, and they conducted 2 technical assistance projects named Bangladesh Urban Earthquake Resilience Project 1 and Bangladesh Urban Earthquake Resilience Project 2. And they conducted 46 stakeholder meetings, 6 advisory committee meetings, and 6 scientific committee meetings. And where our national professor Jamilur Raza Chaudhuri sir was the chief technical advisor, and team leader was Dr. Fuad Bendimerat, world-renowned disaster risk management specialist. According to findings of these 2 technical assistance projects, World Bank created Urban Resilience Project, and Urban Resilience Project 4 part. Urban Resilience Project Rajuk part, Urban Resilience Project DDM part, Urban Resilience Project DNCC part, and DNCC included DSCC, Fire Service and Civil Defense, and Sylhet City Corporation. And 1 monitoring part from Planning Commission, that is Project Coordination and Monitoring Unit. And the overall objectives of this project to strengthening the government of Bangladesh, departments, agencies, and secondary objective to improve the quality of new construction And now, specific objectives of Urban Resilience Project Rajuk PERT. Number one, vulnerability assessment of critical and essential infrastructures like school, college, hospital, police station, fire service, bank, airport. And second, and for this component, we engage international consulting firm, NQI Architects and Engineering of Turkey, and they have already done, they have already assessed 3,252 buildings, and which assessment includes preliminary rapid visual assessment, preliminary engineering assessment, and finally detailed engineering assessment. Preliminary rapid visual assessment we have done for 3,252 buildings, and preliminary engineering assessment without destructive test, we have completed 579 buildings, and finally 209 we have completed detailed engineering assessment. Now our consultant is preparing retrofitting design for these 209 buildings, cost estimate, and finally they will create tender document, and this is their tour, and this project will be, according to tour, their activities will be completed within June for these two components. Second component of this project, development of risk-sensitive land use planning. Actually, we all know earlier it was land use planning, above the ground land use planning. Our DAP of Rajuk, this is land use planning above the ground, like commercial, residential, flood flow zone, sub-flood flow zone, open spaces, green spaces, this type of activities. But for the first time, we have done extensive soil test of Dhaka city. Dhaka city means DMDP area, which includes Gazipur, Narayanganj, Sabar, Keraniganj, and equivalent to 1,528 square kilometer. And we have done 5 types of soil test, and a total 1,825. And 5 types of, this is micro, technical term, micro-temu test, then SPT we all know, then seismic downhole test, seismic wound penetration test, and this type of 5 tests. And after findings of this soil investigation, our consultant prepared risk-sensitive land use planning. Earlier it was land use planning, now it is risk-sensitive land use planning. Here I think most of the participants are planners. So now worldwide known risk-sensitive land use planning, because earthquake, tremor is coming, and in this area, about 100 years ago, 1897, great Assam Indian earthquake occurs, and then actually there was no sufficient building, earthen building damages, a number of earthen building damages, and later other last 150 years, about 9 severe earthquake occurs in this area. And for this reason, this land use plan we need. Land use, risk-sensitive land use plan means not that we cannot construct the buildings on this risk-sensitive land use plan. Actually, we can build on this risk-sensitive land use plan, but we should follow the seismic earthquake provision of Bangladesh National Building Code. And about 6-7 months ago, I attended a very good meeting. I think they organized with the Dhaka Chamber of Commerce. Then I mentioned, if you want, you will construct a earthquake-resistant building, then you need more 20% additional money and for earthquake-resistant building. Then the Chamber of Dhaka Commerce leaders, they are agreed. We will do these buildings with additional 20% money, because under this, inside this building, our $1 billion assets available. So our building should be earthquake resistant. And for your kind information, 1970 Peru earthquake casualties were 70,000. And 2007, same magnitude Peru earthquake casualties were less than 500. And we all know 2010 Haiti earthquake casualties were about 3 lakhs. And in Chile earthquake, which was 500 times greater than Haiti earthquake, their casualties less than 500. And 1995 Kobe earthquake, their casualties were 6,500. Due to their proper preparedness, they decreased their casualties. And it is mentionable that our 1970 cyclone casualties were more or less 1 million, 1991, 138,000, and 2007, 3,500, and 2009, about 350. And decreasing our, due to proper initiative of the Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief, we decreased our casualties, cyclones and floods casualties. So we should take proper preparation for earthquake disaster. And here our keynote speaker mentioned the win-win situation. Yes, you are rightly pointed out. And under this urban resilience project in the NCC PERT, a national operation center is going to be established. And so far I know most of the equipments have already come and they will install this. And so far I know under Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief, a national emergency operation center is going to be established. I congratulate, I thank you, private sector. And this is expensive work and this is proactive work. And you are going to introduce this private sector emergency operation center. And not only one, I propose around the Dhaka city, inside one, around the Dhaka city and 4 and 5, separate. And where disaster, earthquakes, damage will come, we don't know. Operation center may be damaged. So 4 or 5 separate places. And our national operation center, that must be earthquake resistant, of course. And my project number 3, electronic construction permitting system. And due to lack of this software, and a number of buildings have already been built by deviation and RIXI. And that is horizontal deviation and also vertical deviation, we could not control this. But under this project, we have created a sophisticated software by RTI USA, and we are going to introduce within a short time. Number 4, professional registration program for engineers, architects, planners. Due to lack of money, we are going to structural designers. And already training lecture 48 lecture have already been done, and each lecture 3 hours. Now it is under exam and Viva Voice under BOET. BOET will control everything for registration engineers. And our Chamber of Commerce and my supervisor, I am, for your kind information, I am a PhD student under the University of Tokyo. My supervisor advises, please sit with your businessmen. I don't understand why I will sit businessmen. Then he explained, businessmen, they have money. If you convince, if they understand their risks of buildings, they will do. Money is no problem for them. They will do building and earthquake resist building. Then I talked in that Dhaka Chamber of Commerce meetings, and they are very happy. We will spend more additional 20% money, no problem. So this is very good idea, and this type of forum is very good idea. And my moderator pointed out BNBC, Bangladesh National Building Code 2020, and very good document have already been prepared, and our government of Bangladesh have already approved this. Now, as a technical person, we are all happy. And BNBC 2020. And one of the components of my project, Urban Resilience, BNBC Enforcement and Implementation. We have engaged International Court Council of USA. They have been preparing implementation and enforcement strategy. And where a renowned expert, experienced like Professor Jamil Reza Chaudhuri sir, Dr. S.K. Ghosh, he is Calcutta National, and he is coming on tomorrow. He will coming in Bangladesh. And last 3 years, he had been working for the last 3 years. So, BNBC. Another component, and actually I mentioned these all types of activities are reform works. Razuk did not do this type of work. Razuk do earthwork, drain work, footpath work, lake work, this type of work. As I am chief engineer, I know this. But under this urban resilience project, this is proactive project of the government of Bangladesh. And I congratulate, I am grateful to our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and this is her proactive project. Regarding earthquake, we should do something. And relevant organization, Raju, Department of Disaster and DNCC, DSCC, Sylhet City Corporation, Fire Service, and finally Planning Commission engagement, all are engagement. And this project is going to be completed October 2023. And my final component of this project, create and operationalize urban resilience unit. Because Raju did not do this type of work. Once consultant will leave us, who will continue this type of works? We have done only 3,252 buildings, but remaining buildings, thousands of buildings of Dhaka city. Not only Dhaka city, and other city also, Sylhet, Mymensingh, Chittagong, Coxbazar, this area, earthquake-prone, vulnerable area. So, for continuation, this type of works, and for implementation of the recommendation supplied by the international consultants, and for your kind information, we are going to establish a sophisticated laboratory with 25 category of equipments, where 10 categories equipments are new in Bangladesh. Even this is new. Even in Buet, I am also a student of Buet, but in Buet, this 10 type of senior equipment is not available. Already procurement. And under this project, a building, laboratory, research, training, testing laboratory building under construction near the Titimiri College, to the west side of Titimiri College. So, for continuation, for implementation of the international recommendation and for running this sophisticated laboratory, one of the components that is created and operationalized Urban Resilience Unit and named Bangladesh Institute of Structural Risk and Resilience, and this is under process, establishment of this institute under process under the Ministry of Housing and Public Works. And this type of institute should be run by a trustee board, because my 26-7 years experience, Sarkari government officials works 9 to 5 p.m., 9 to 5 p.m. But my experience, after 5 p.m. my work, main work starts. Who will work government salary? For this reason, we are going to suggest to the government of Bangladesh, please establish this organization like CGIS, Center for Environmental Information, CGIS, IWM, IIFC, and which would be run by trustee board, higher level trustee board. আমাকে সুযোগ দেওয়ার জন্য অনেক ধন্যবাদ। আমি 2008 সালে জাপানে ট্রেনিং করি। মাই টপিক ওয়াজ মিটিগেশন স্ট্র্যাটেজি ফর আরবান আর্থকুয়েক ডিজাস্টার। সেই সুবাদে দেখেছি জাপানে সবচেয়ে বড় লোকেরা তারা বসবাস করে পাহাড়ের পাদদেশে, আর আমাদের দেশে সবচেয়ে গরিব মানুষেরা বাস করে পাহাড়ের পাদদেশে। এবং ল্যান্ডস্লাইড হইলে আমাদের ডিডিএম স্যার, ডিজি স্যার জানেন, ল্যান্ডস্লাইড হইলে প্রায়ই সেখানে প্রতি বছরই লোক মারা যায়। জাপান দেশে ভূমিকম্প হইলে মানুষ দৌড়িয়া বিল্ডিংয়ের ভিতরে যায়। আমাদের বাংলাদেশে ভূমিকম্প হইলে আমরা দৌড়িয়ে বিল্ডিংয়ের বাইরে আসতেছি, কারণ আমাদের নিজের বিল্ডিংয়ের উপর নিজের কোনো আস্থা নাই। আমরা আস্থা ফিরিয়ে আনার জন্য আরবান রেজিলিয়েন্স প্রজেক্ট বাস্তবায়ন করতেছি। থ্যাংক ইউ, অনেক ধন্যবাদ আপনাদের।
Thank you, Mr. Abdul Latif Alali, for your valuable comments. I would request Mohammad Dulal Mia, Deputy Director, Operational Maintenance, FSCD. Sir, at this stage, I would like to ask the fire service and civil defense plays a pivotal role for providing fire protection, emergency and other critical public safety services to the people. In this session, we're eager to know how can the private sector and FSCD be integrated for long-term disaster management work, therefore reducing the risk of man-made incidents such as fire, factory collapse, etc. And one more thing, sir, I'd like to request, for the interest of time, I would like to ask that this be done in 5 minutes if it's possible. Thank you. I know that you have a lot of things to say, but please, thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Prime Guest, participant, Assalamu alaikum. আমি আজকে এই অনুষ্ঠানে এসে নিজেকে খুব গর্ববোধ করছি, কেননা ঢাকা চেম্বার অফ কমার্সের উদ্যোগে প্রাইভেট সেক্টরের একটি সক্রিয় জরুরি দুর্যোগ সমাধান কেন্দ্র প্রতিষ্ঠা নিঃসন্দেহে প্রশংসনীয়। সরকারি জরুরি সমাধানকারী প্রতিষ্ঠানসমূহের পাশাপাশি বেসরকারি একটি প্রতিষ্ঠান কাজ করবে, তা দেশের জন্য খুবই গুরুত্বপূর্ণ। আপনারা জেনে খুশি হবেন, বাংলাদেশ সরকার প্রত্যেকটি উপজেলায় ফায়ার সার্ভিস এবং সিভিল ডিফেন্স স্টেশন স্থাপনের জন্য অনুমোদন দিয়েছে এবং অলরেডি আমাদের প্রত্যেকটি উপজেলাতে ফায়ার স্টেশন হচ্ছে। সরকার জনগণের সেবা দূর করে পৌঁছে দেওয়ার জন্যই সরকার এই প্রচেষ্টা। তার পাশাপাশি আমাদের বেসরকারি প্রতিষ্ঠানের যে সক্রিয় অংশগ্রহণটা অনুধাবন করতে পেরেছে আজকে এই 2022 সনে এসে তা প্রতিফলিত হচ্ছে। আমি তাদেরকে ধন্যবাদ জানাই। আমাদের আপনারা জানেন 1991 সনের 29 এপ্রিল 29 এপ্রিল যে জলোচ্ছ্বাস এবং ঘূর্ণিঝড় হয়েছিল চট্টগ্রামে 1,30,000 লোক মারা গিয়েছিল। তারপরে 2007 সনের সিডুর, আইলা, নার্গিস, বুলবুল অনেক কিছুই হয়ে গেছে। আপনারা জানেন এটা এই দেশ দুর্যোগ প্রবণ দেশ, কিন্তু ওই 1,30,000 লোক মৃত্যুর পরে তারপরে যতগুলা ঘূর্ণিঝড় জলোচ্ছ্বাস হয়েছে সেখানে কিন্তু এত লোক মারা যায়নি। অনেক বক্তারাই বলে গেলেন ওই পাহাড়ে পাদদেশ। আমি নেপাল গিয়েছিলাম, ভূমিকম্প হয়েছিল আপনারা জানেন নেপালে, আমি সেখানে দেখেছি। আসলে পুরা নেপালটাই কিন্তু একটা পর্যটক এরিয়া, কিন্তু সেখানে দেখা যাচ্ছে তারা পাহাড়ের উপর ঘর বেঁধে আছে, আর আমরা পাহাড়ের কাছে থাকলে আমরা তাদেরকে নেমে নিয়ে আসি। আমাদের কি জনসচেতনতার অভাব রয়েছে। জনসচেতনতা বৃদ্ধির ফলেই আমাদের এই 91 সনের পরে যে সমস্ত সিডুর জলোচ্ছ্বাস হয়েছে আমাদের কিন্তু এত প্রাণহানি হয় নাই। আপনারা জানেন আরবান রিলিজেন্স প্রজেক্টের আওতায় আমাদের অলরেডি কাজ শুরু হয়ে গেছে। পূর্ববর্তী বক্তারাও বলে গেলেন। আমাদের ঢাকাতে মিরপুর 10 নম্বরে একটি কমান্ড সেন্টার স্থাপন করা হয়েছে এবং আরেকটি হয়েছে সিলেটে। এই দুইটি আরবান প্রজেক্ট রিলিজেন্সের মাধ্যমে আমাদের ফায়ার কন্ট্রোল রুম এখানে স্থাপিত হচ্ছে। অলরেডি এটার গুরুত্ব বুঝেই একমাত্র এই দুইটা এখানে স্থাপিত হচ্ছে। আমি আশা করব আরও পরবর্তীতে এরকম গুরুত্ব বুঝে দেশের অন্যান্য জায়গায় এরকম যেন ফায়ার কন্ট্রোল রুম খোলা হয়। আমাদের সরকারিভাবে কিছু অপতুল্যতা আছে, কিছু ভান্ডিং আছে। আপনারা জানেন নিমতলির ঘটনা, এপার টাওয়ারের ঘটনা, রানা প্লাজার ঘটনা, চুরিহাট্টার ঘটনা আপনারা অবগত আছেন। কিন্তু আমরা প্রযুক্তির দিক দিয়ে এগিয়ে আসতে পারি নাই। আমরা সরকারিভাবে তাদেরকে যে প্রযুক্তির মাধ্যমে এগুলা প্রতিরোধ করা উচিত সেগুলো আমরা করতে পারি নাই। তো বর্তমানে সেই সমস্ত বড় বড় দুর্ঘটনার প্রেক্ষিতে বেসরকারি সেক্টর এগিয়ে এসেছে এবং তারা দেখতেছে যে অজোরে প্রাণ ঝরছে, কিন্তু ইহার কোনো প্রতিকার নেই। সরকারের পাশাপাশি আপনারা আসতেছেন, আপনাদেরকে ফায়ার সার্ভিসের পক্ষ থেকে আমি ধন্যবাদ জানাই। আমি শুধু এই ঢাকাতে না, আমি প্রত্যেকটি সিটি কর্পোরেশনে এরকম চেম্বার অফ কমার্সের মাধ্যমে তাদেরকে আমাদের পাশে থেকে কাজ করার অঙ্গীকার করার জন্য আমি আহ্বান জানাচ্ছি। এবং অলরেডি আপনারা জানেন আমাদের দেশে 60,000 ভলেন্টিয়ার তৈরির কাজ আমরা সমাপ্তির পথে আছে। আজকের অনুষ্ঠানে অনেক ভলেন্টিয়ার এসেছেন, তারা আমার সঙ্গে পরিচিত হয়েছেন। তারা যদি সিটি কর্পোরেশন, প্রত্যেকটা সিটি কর্পোরেশন, আমি সিলেট বিভাগের প্রধান ছিলাম গত মাস পর্যন্ত। আমি এখানে এসেছি গত মাসের 25 তারিখে জয়েন করছি অপারেশনের দায়িত্বে ঢাকাতে। সেখানে আমি বিভাগীয় কমিশনারকে প্রশ্ন করেছিলাম যে আমরা শুধু ভলেন্টিয়ার যে তৈরি করছি, এদের পিছনে সরকারে খরচ করতে পারে না যথোপযুক্ত। তো এদেরকে যখন আমরা ডেকে আনি ওয়ার্ল্ড ভিশনের মাধ্যমে আমি একটা বড় একটা করেছিলাম সিলেটে, তখন তারা বলেছিল যে আমরা সিটি কর্পোরেশনে ফান্ড প্লেস করি এই দুর্যোগ ব্যবস্থাপনার থেকে। তো সিটি কর্পোরেশনে যদি ফান্ড প্লেস করে থাকে, আপনাদেরকে আমি অনুরোধ করব আমাদেরকে আপনারা ইনভাইট করে অন্তপক্ষে দিয়ে তাদেরকে ধরে রাখা যায়। অনেক ভলেন্টিয়ার ঝরে পড়তেছে। আমি আশা করব এই প্রত্যেকটি সিটি কর্পোরেশনের মাধ্যমে এই ভলেন্টিয়ারকে যাতে আপনারা ধরে রাখেন। আর আজকের এই অনুষ্ঠানের বেসরকারি উদ্যোগ তাদের জন্য আমার একটু প্রশ্ন আছে। প্রশ্নটা হলো, জরুরি সেবাদানকারী প্রতিষ্ঠানটির সাংগঠনিক কাঠামো কী হবে? প্রতিষ্ঠানটির নিয়ন্ত্রণকারী কে থাকবে? সরকারি অন্যান্য জরুরি সেবাদানকারী প্রতিষ্ঠানের সাথে কিভাবে সমন্বয় সাধন করবে, আমাদের সাথে কিভাবে তারা সমন্বয় সাধন করবে, এগুলো যদি ক্লিয়ারেন্স হওয়া যায় তাহলে আমরা তাদের সাথে আরও সক্রিয়ভাবে কাজ করতে সক্ষম হব। প্রতিষ্ঠানটির জরুরি সারাদানকারী দলটির যোগ্যতা কি হবে, প্রশিক্ষিত হবে কি না, যে কোনো প্রতিষ্ঠান বিশেষত ফায়ার সার্ভিসের স্বেচ্ছাসেবকরা কি একত্রে অন্তর্ভুক্ত থাকবে কি না, কীভাবে কাজ করবে এবং তাদের কাজের পরিধি কি হবে। উক্ত জরুরি সারাদানকারী কেন্দ্র পরিচালনায় কোনো প্রকার সাহায্যে বিশেষত প্রশিক্ষণের প্রয়োজন হলে ফায়ার সার্ভিস সিভিল সর্বদা সহযোগিতার হাত বাড়িয়ে দেবে বলে আমি আশ্বাস রেখে আমার এই সংক্ষিপ্ত বক্তব্য শেষ করছি। আসসালামু আলাইকুম, খুদা হাফেজ, জয় বাংলা।
Thank you, Mohammed Dulal Mia, sir, the Deputy Director of Operations and Maintenance, FSCD, for your valuable comments. At this stage, I would like to invite Ms. Momena Khatun, Joint Secretary, DM1, DM3, DMR. Madam, again, I would request that we can restrict our answers to this specific question in the interest of time. You are requested to talk about how government can help to institutionalize and popularize the private sector emergency operations center for emergency response to benefit all major stakeholders. And please state your valuable remarks on sustainable risk management. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Honorable DG Disaster, DG DDM and other honorable guests on the dais, and ladies and gentlemen. I am happy to be here. Thank you to invite me to come here. You know, Bangladesh is a disaster-prone country. According to the German Watch research, out of all disaster-prone countries, Bangladesh stands 7th. Disaster is very common in Bangladesh, but our paradigm shift is to be obvious. Earlier, Bangladesh Ministry of Disaster Management was concentrating only in relief and rehabilitation activities. Now it is more attentive into disaster risk financing activities. You know, 1 taka involvement in risk financing saves 7 taka. So this is more useful or more helpful for our disaster prevention and relief activities. Bangladesh, it is true that government is interested in risk financing. Risk financing is one of the major activities of MODMR, but you know, in relief activities, government may have some limitations sometimes, especially in emergency situations. In emergency situations, in our Act, Disaster Management Act, public sector involvement is recognized. In case of emergency and reconstruction cases, health services and in housing sectors, public sectors are welcome to support government. Volunteerism. My earlier presenter was speaking of volunteerism. In Disaster Management Act, in Section 13, Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief has been mandated to form disaster volunteer. Disaster volunteer, the formation of disaster volunteer rule is yet to be finalized. Save the Children was working with Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief. At the same time, some works were done by Ministry of Local Government. Now, both the volunteer guidelines are with Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief, and it will be, I think, within a very short time, the rule will be finalized and it will take in the form of a law, and then volunteerism will be recognized and salary and other facilities to be enlarged for the volunteers will be easy for the ministry and other accordingly. Private sector, for private sector, it is very easy to mobilize resource and take decision, but in government sector, decision taking and making resource mobilization takes some time, and sometimes for this reason, private sector may be given preferences in some cases. SOD, Standing Order on Disaster. SOD is a auto-generated document. It says who will do what and who will do what when. In SOD, the National Committee and the root level committee, if you go through SOD, you will see no part of life, no strata of group is left. Even the people with special need, religious leaders, business communities, freedom fighters, in all section of people is included in the committees, in ward committees, in union committees, in district committees. The voices from the root level comes up, and then it is possible for government to, in law formulation, to take this voice in consideration. Some references has been given by my previous presenter. I have been in Japan. In Japan earthquake that happened in 2011, that means we had an occasion to visit Miyagi prefecture. I saw that most of the people was rescued by themselves, and after that 46% was rescued by themselves, and after that the person who was beside him or her was the man who rescued him. So it is obvious that me is always for me, but after me, the person who is beside me is the rescuer of me. So we should keep good relation with our neighbor and with our with the people who are surrounding us. And from this suggestion, Japan government had developed a Kitakami village, where all the village people are always communicating with each other. They have passes to go from one house to another house. They have interlinked by telephone and other negotiating instruments. About private sector, I should say that every private institution like hospital, shopping mall, factories, and other factories, other multi-story building should have their own rescue team and rescue plan, and must have alternative path, and that will be shown in arrow marks so that everybody can see it and get the path when if there is any emergency like fire or earthquake, etc. Government, NUC, National Emergency Operations Center. NUC is a body where all the developed rescue department will have their own office, and coordination activities will be easy during any big disaster like earthquake, it may be big cyclone and other disaster that happens normally in Bangladesh. NUC, we have got land for NUC in Tejko, CSD, and PEO is private sector emergency operations center is yet to be flourished, and formation is not clear. But NUC is going to be built. NUC and PEOC, I think, will be well connected, and rescue and rehabilitation activities will be very good and very well connected, and preparation and connectivity between the between the organization will be very nice. Private sector in Bangladesh, it is 36% of our GDP is a contribution from private sector. Private sector is recruiting a lot of young people every year. Our government is depending mostly for its resources on private sector. Private sector may, if coordination between private sector and government sector is good and healthy, then development activities will be more enhanced. Disaster management is not a work only for the government. It's a cross-cutting issue. Disaster and DIA, disaster is a cross-cutting issue. It is not the work only for Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief. Every organization who has structure, who has things to do, must keep in mind how to prevent when there is any emergency. And government will support, but your support is first of all by yourself. Thus, private sector and government sector, if there is coordinated and well connected, then it will not be a problem for both private sector and for government. And Bangladesh will be a disaster resilient country as it is now. Thank you.
Thank you, madam, for your valuable speech. Very interesting to learn that that 1 taka spent in disaster prevention actually saves 7 taka. That is new information for me as well. You are correct. Government resource mobilization does take time, but in this case, private sector, I think, is because of our own limited resources, we like to act quickly. And I think with the proper SOPs coming in from the government sector, the private sector will know exactly what to do when it comes to mitigating disaster risks as well as during times of disaster. At this stage, I would like to invite our special guest, Mr. M.A. Momen, Vice President FBCCI. Sir, if you would like to come here. We would all love to hear your views about your long-held experience on the private sector and how the private sector can be supported by the government for private sector engagement in disaster relief management. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, to our chief guest, the Director General, Mr. Atiqul Islam, the keynote paper discussant, the panelists, respected guests, members from the media, Mr. Talha, the TCCI Director, and I would have loved to see the President also. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to say a few words. I hardly see not much foreigners present here. I don't know why we are going in English, but anyway, I think it's a recording. It's going to the international forum also. I see, okay. So first of all, congratulations that for initiating this and launching this morning the PEOC, the PERT, and launching this, and then I think this session will be more on the functional side, how this will function. So as such, the stakeholders who are involved, the ministry, the government, the private sector, you have involved everybody, and rightly so. A beautiful paper, a very comprehensive paper was presented by Mr. Shahid. I think we got a lot of points from that. I'm taking it with me with a lot of expectations. And then again, the important stakeholder in the disaster management, especially safety, security, and all that, the gentlemen, the panelists from the private, fire. Yeah, that's very important. And then the Ministry of Environment, Mrs. Momena. Thank you very much. First, finally, you mentioned that the private sector and the government must work together. And then she emphasized also rightly that we must have a coordination, strong coordination to work together. Along with that, I would say the involvement of the World Vision, the Action Aid that Dhaka's Chamber has initiated working together and finally coming out with a formula, which is very important right now. I say this because the interesting part was that some of the statistics given by the Rajuk panelist, sir, very good, the chief engineer, which he mentioned that, see, over the years, how we have reduced and how we have tackled the disaster and how the numbers of casualties have decreased. This is phenomenal. Even I had no idea that it had come to this level, only 350 from a score of 130,000. So you can see the government is doing a lot. At the same time, what is needed is the private sector has to give the jerk. And right now, there are disasters which are natural. As the paper presenter said, that we are a disaster-prone nation. 1/3 of our country lies above 5 meters above the sea level. So you see how vulnerable we are. As such, you have to cope up with what is going on. The climate change is taking place, environmental considerations are there, and it's becoming a very big thing because I was 2 months back in Canada, and in last month in April, I was shocked that on the 15th of April, it was I think our Boishak day, and it was snowing over there. And they said in 12 years, 13 years, they never saw, it's supposed to be spring. And it was hell with snow like that, you know, about 6 feet of snow. Everything was stalled. So what is happening around, they are all worried about what's going on around the world. There's a lot of things changing. In Saudi Arabia, two months back, with our private sector, you know, the advisor, Mr. Salman F. Rahman, I had the opportunity to go for Umrah. And of course, it was a business visit, but we did the Umrah. Saudi Arabia is now with greenery. They have brought in trees and implanted, and it's all green. You can't see that it's a desert anymore. Total change. So all around, something is happening, and where those who are not conscious, they are falling back, and they will pay a very high price. So this vulnerability has to be controlled, and for this reason, I am representing the federation, where under this all the chambers and all the associations are there. All the sectors are our members. So each sector has its own problems, and we know some of these are not only natural. What happened in Rana Plaza is still pricking us. What happened to Shojib is still pricking us, because every time, ultimately, the businessman is given the blame, you see. And as a result, some of these could be man-made. So how do we do that? We have to tackle it. We have to come to our senses and do something about it. Those which are man-made, they can be tackled. Those which are by act of God, that is different. But for that, the government in general, we have a very good disaster plan management, and Bangladesh is actually commended outside that how we are tackling, how we have done it. Because this was always known as as a disaster-prone country. And now, with 100 economic zones, with the per capita income growing, with the business now coming, you know, the industry is now contributing more than 30% in the GDP, which was only 16, 17% 10, 15 years back. And now, as this industry will grow, business will grow, the risk, as they grow, we have to tackle that. Otherwise, those risks will take you and will suddenly collapse. এরকমভাবে উঠবো, আবার ক্যাটাস্ট্রফিক কোলাপস হয়ে যাবে। সো এই গ্রোথ যে কোনো সময় যে কোনো একটা অবস্থা হতে পারে, এটার জন্য উই হ্যাভ টু বি ভেরি কেয়ারফুল অ্যান্ড টেক টাইমলি মেজার্স। সো আই থিঙ্ক এই কারণে প্রাইভেট সেক্টর ইজ নাও সিরিয়াস। আমরা এফবিসিসিআই থেকে সেল করেছি উইথ বিডার সঙ্গে একটা কোঅর্ডিনেশন সেল আছে, উইভ গট টুগেদার উইথ দ্যাম, we have made a safety আপনি অ্যাকচুয়ালি ফায়ার ব্রিগেডের আগের যে ব্রিগেডিয়ার কি নাম ওনার কাইয়ুম নাকি উনি আমাদের এখানে অ্যাজ এ সেল চিফ জি জয়েন করেছেন এবং আমরা সেল করেছি সেই সেলের সঙ্গে কোঅর্ডিনেট করছি 5200 ইন্ডাস্ট্রি অলরেডি আমরা লোকাল ইন্ডাস্ট্রি নট গার্মেন্ট ইন্ডাস্ট্রি সেগুলো আমরা ভিজিট করেছি একটা চেকলিস্ট করেছি অ্যাওয়ারনেস প্রোগ্রাম করেছি ট্রেনিং করছি কি লাগবে কেন লাগবে সেফটি মেজার্স কীভাবে হবে ওনারা অ্যাডভাইস করছে এবং এখন গভর্নমেন্ট সেক্টরের সঙ্গে প্রাইভেট সেক্টরের সঙ্গে আমরা সমন্বয় করে এই ধরনের প্ল্যান করেছি যে ফর্মুলা তৈরি করেছি যাতে এইগুলি কীভাবে অ্যাড্রেস করতে হয় এবং এই 3 মাসের মধ্যে ভিজিট করে একটা রিকমেন্ডেশন আসছে সেই রিকমেন্ডেশনটা এখন উপর লেভেলে যথাযথ জায়গায় যাবে সেখানে গেলে এই যে এখন যে মেজার্সগুলো নিতে হয় চেকলিস্ট দেখে যে আমার সিঁড়ি নাই আমার ওইটা নাই লোকাল ইন্ডাস্ট্রি তো বড় ছোট মিলিয়ে সব তো আর বড় বড় বোমা সাইজ না যারা ধরেন 1 মিলিয়ন 10 মিলিয়নের উপরে ছোট ছোট এরা হচ্ছে হাউ দে আর গোয়িং টু কোপ এইখানে সাহায্যের প্রয়োজন হবে সব তারা পারবে না বাট ওভারঅল ইয়েতে উই নিড এ হেল্প আমার যেটা বিশ্বাস আমরা প্রাইভেট সেক্টর থেকে এমফাসাইজ দিচ্ছি যে যারাই ইনভেস্টমেন্ট করবে অন রিসার্চ টু ইমপ্রুভ দেয়ার সেফটি সিকিউরিটি এইসব মেজার্সগুলো প্রিভেনশন ইয়ের জন্য ডিজাস্টার প্রিভেন্ট করার জন্য যেসব সেই সবগুলোকে আপনাকে কাস্টমস ডিউটি এগুলি ওয়েভ করতে হবে যারা এই ধরনের মেজারমেন্টে যাবে এই প্রোগ্রামে যাবে তাদেরকে সমস্ত কিছু থেকে 10 বছরের জন্য আপনার ট্যাক্স ফ্রি করে দিতে হবে এইসব এবং ক্যাপিটাল মেশিনারি এবং যেসব এগুলো আছে সেই মেশিনারি এগুলির জন্য যেটা ইনভলভ যেটা ওই যে ইঞ্জিনিয়ার সাহেবও বলেছেন যে আমরা এই ধরনের ইকুইপমেন্টগুলো আনছি সেগুলোকে প্রাইভেট সেক্টর যদি ইনভলভ হয় প্রাইভেট সেক্টরকে সেই ধরনের ইয়েকে আপনাকে রেয়াত দিতে হবে তা না হলে আমরা নিজের ইয়েতে দাঁড়াতে পারবো না অ্যাজ ইট ইজ আপনারা জানেন যে ইট ইজ বিকামিং ভেরি টাফ অ্যান্ড এ টার্মোয়েল সিচুয়েশন আজকে যে আবার যুদ্ধ হয়ে যে যুদ্ধের প্রেক্ষিতে আপনারা তো বুঝতেই পারছেন তেলের অবস্থা কী ব্যবসার অবস্থা কী নানান দিক থেকে একটা প্রেশার আসছে যেখান থেকে আমাদের বের হতে হবে একটা খারাপ সময় এখন হয়তো যাচ্ছে সেটা হয়তো কেটে যাবে খারাপ ভালো মিলিয়ে একসময় আবার ভালো হবে ইট উইল বি এ সাইকেল বাট লং রানে মিড টার্মে আমাদের কী করা এবং যাতে একটা পার্টিকুলার ইয়েতে আমরা পারফেক্টলি আমাদের ইন্ডাস্ট্রিয়াল এই গ্রোথকে সামঞ্জস্য করে কম্পিটিটিভ থাকার জন্য সারা দুনিয়ার সঙ্গে কীভাবে হতে হবে কীভাবে লেবার সেফটি সিকিউরিটি আরও করতে হবে সেই ধরনের সবগুলো করার জন্য আমাদেরকে মেজার্স নিতে হবে উই হ্যাভ টু ডু দ্য রাইট থিং আই থিঙ্ক দি পেপার প্রেজেন্টার লাস্টে যে কথাগুলো বলেছেন হোয়াট ইজ দ্য ওয়ে ফরওয়ার্ড হি হ্যাজ গিভেন নট অনলি দ্য প্রবলেমস হি হ্যাজ অলসো pinpointed certain measures that we must take. I am sure আমার এই কথার পরে আমাদের প্রধান অতিথি সাহেব একটু আরও যোগ দিবেন এই পর্যন্ত আমার এই ফ্রি মনে হয়েছে যে প্রাইভেট সেক্টর ক্যানট সিট আইডল অ্যান্ড উই আর নট সিটিং আইডল অ্যাজ ইউ সেড দেখেন আমরা সেল করেছি ইনফরমেশন আদান প্রদান করছি অ্যাওয়ারনেসের জন্য প্রোগ্রাম করছি এবং ট্রেনিং প্রোগ্রামের মাধ্যমে ভিজিট করে চেকলিস্ট করে এগুলি তৈরি করছি যাতে এগুলি ফুলফিল করে টুডে ও টুমরো এটা এই জন্য বলছি যে আপনারা জানেন হয়তো 2026 আমরা গ্র্যাজুয়েট করব টু এ ডেভেলপিং কান্ট্রি যখন ডেভেলপিং কান্ট্রিতে আমরা যাব ওয়েন উইল ডেভেলপ উই উইল নট বি গেটিং অল দিস ডিউটি ফ্রি কোটা ফ্রি অ্যাক্সেস এনিমোর আজকে আমরা গর্বিত কারণ এই ধাক্কার চোটে রানা প্লাজার পরে কিন্তু এন্টায়ার এই যে অ্যাকর্ড অ্যালায়েন্স এরা এসে গার্মেন্ট ইন্ডাস্ট্রিগুলোকে অ্যাওয়্যার করেছে প্রোগ্রাম নিয়েছে এখন আমরা আল্লাহ রহমতে 350 ফ্যাক্টরি গ্রিন ফ্যাক্টরি বাংলাদেশের মতো গ্রিন ফ্যাক্টরি পৃথিবীর কোথাও আর নাই উই আর নাম্বার 2 ইন দ্য রেডিমেড গার্মেন্ট সবাই জানেন এটা এবং 10টা গ্রিন ফ্যাক্টরির মধ্যে পৃথিবীর মধ্যে বাংলাদেশের 7টা বাংলাদেশে আছে এটাও সবাই জানেন এটার কন্টিনিউটি ওইদিকে হয়ে গেছে এখন অন্য অন্য ইন্ডাস্ট্রিতে আসবে টুডে অর টুমরো ওই যে পানির বোতল দেখছেন এইটাও লোকালি প্রডিউস হলে এটা ইন্টারন্যাশনাল স্ট্যান্ডার্ড কিনা এটার ব্যাপারে কথা আসবে তখন আর আপনি এটা প্রডিউস করতে পারবেন না উইদাউট ইয়ে বিকজ ইউ হ্যাভ টু ইন্টিগ্রেট উইথ দ্য ইন্টারন্যাশনাল সিস্টেম তো আমরা সেই জন্যে ওই গ্র্যাজুয়েশনের আগেই আমাদের প্রোডাক্ট ডেভেলপমেন্ট করা সেফটি সিকিউরিটি ঠিক করা এই সবগুলোকে অবকাঠামোগুলো আরও স্ট্রং করতে হবে এবং এই চ্যালেঞ্জেস মিট করার জন্য আমাদেরকে রেডি হতে হবে এই আশা ব্যক্ত করে ঢাকা চেম্বারকে আরেকবার অনেক অনেক ধন্যবাদ আমাকে এই সুযোগটা দেওয়ার জন্য অনেক ধন্যবাদ বিজনেসম্যানদের পক্ষ থেকে থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ মিস্টার তালা
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful, wonderful speech. In fact, one of the things that we keep on highlighting, however, conveniently forgetting at times, is that climate change is real, and whatever steps that we need to take them now. Yes, man-made disasters can be mitigated with a bit more awareness at all levels, not just at the top level where the management is concerned, but at the bottom level where the workers are on the floors as well. Oftentimes that level of awareness is not created, and sometimes silly mistakes cause major disasters, which ultimately the business houses themselves need to take the brunt of. And I would also like to thank you for pointing out something very relevant, that oftentimes the most compliant companies are not incentivized well enough. As we all know, that the majority of the highest LEED certified companies, especially in industries, are in Bangladesh. However, these companies are not getting any benefits for these additional investments that they had to make their factories this compliant. And I think if they're recognized properly, if they're given the incentives properly, I think that would make more sense. Mr. Hilali at one point said that private sector has all the money. Actually, sir, private sector has the best resources to manage money. We don't have all the money. We try our level best to manage our limited resources and to make sure that we can make it more viable in the long run. In fact, the last 2 years, if anything, was a testing time for all the private industries, where we had to weather some of the most difficult situations as with the rest of the world. And I think moving forward, it can only get better, inshallah. At this stage, I would like to invite our chief guest, Mr. Mohammad Atikul Haq, DG of Department of Disaster Management, Government of Bangladesh. Sir, you are requested to share the perspective and roles of government in near future for addressing the DRM and views on the entire discussion held thus far. Thank you.
Dear moderator, distinguished discussion and respected participants, honorable special guest, dear keynote speaker, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. Private Sector Emergency Operations Center PEOC is completed a new idea in Bangladesh as well as in South Asia. I want to congratulate and thanks to Dhaka Chamber of Commerce and Industry, DCCI, for establishing the PEOC. At national level, the Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief is also establishing a National Emergency Operations Center near Tesgao CHD within the government 1 acre land. So this opportunity will bring two emergency operation centers together to maximize mutual capacity of the humanitarian response preparedness as well as the response and recovery operation. For an emergency response as well, trained team is an important imperative. For this, as well as I want to congratulate and thank once again in Dhaka Chamber of Commerce and Industry has taken initiative to establish private sector emergency response team. Parallelly, DCCI is also establishing databases for support preparedness and operation of the Emergency Operations Center and Emergency Response team in an informed manner. Data and information is a vital taking right decision at the right moment. When every minute count in emergency, I think all of us understand the utility of the data. Ladies and gentlemen, I strongly believe that as soon as the PEOC and PERT will be in the complete form, that would be a big support for the National Disaster Risk Management System. As we all know, Disaster Management Department is the responsible as well as disaster MODMR, our ministry will be responsible for the disaster management system. It is not possible for only the ministry and or directorate or other agencies or other NGOs or other groups. We need a whole of society approach. All corner people will need to approach this disaster. Bangladesh is this level. We have to take important position and upright position in the world to manage the disaster. DDM will provide all necessary support to make the private sector emergency operations center and private sector emergency response team equipped and skilled within the scope of the department. We will also explore mutual learning and exchange the academic courses sharing through the respective training institutes. We have an international standard training institute at DDM building, and we are like to establish for 8-acre lands in Tongi, and international standard training institute to cope all the disaster. Dear participants, now I want to focus on the SOD 2019. This is called the Bible of Disaster Management. That the provision of the private sector working group, activation of this group can be most comprehensive way of coordination with other humanitarian actors institutionally. DDM will also support Dhaka Chamber of Commerce and Industry for strengthening their capacity of the coordination. Ladies and gentlemen, I also want to focus on the participation of the disaster risk management through the existing disaster management committee across the system. As you know, the highest level committee is chaired by Honorable Prime Minister, and very root level committee is the Ward Disaster Management Committee in the every ward. You already know the near about 1 million member of the Disaster Management Committee. DDM is try to trained up, try to monitor this committee and try to monitor their activities and trained up all the volunteers of DDM, CPP, fire service volunteer and others. Our ministry is responsible for the volunteers regulation and volunteers oriented other job. There is a clear provision of the inclusion of private sector representative in this committee. This participation will build up the bridge among the existing humanitarian actors and private sector, which will be a long-lasting impact and bring another paradigm shift in the area of disaster risk management in Bangladesh. With this note of hope, I want to conclude my remarks, looking forward to follow-up activities based on the outcome of this symposium. Joy Bangla. Thanks all.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to remind you all that every one of these panel members are extremely busy in their in their own professions, and I thank you profusely for giving us your valuable time today to share your views and discussions in this very, very relevant topic today. Thank you very much. Could I have a round of applause for all the panelists, please? Thank you for all your valuable comments and discussions. Sirs and madam, could I request you to just come in front of the stage? We would have a small photo session. After that, I would like to invite all the participants today. We have some small refreshments arranged outside, and I would please ask you to enjoy that. Thank you very much for attending this session so much. Thank you.